Okay, so today we are doing, this is the second I'm doing in a series, and the series is called Gathering in the Light, and really it's something that will see us through Christmas and just into the new year. And if you want to listen to any of the other ones, the red little form on the chair in front of you will show you how to get the podcasts and things like that. And if you want to be on our mailing list, then the blue one is there for you. You can use that one to get on our mailing list. So last week we talked about the idea that light, we did the candlelight, light was in fact everywhere. That what we think of as being darkness is really light that we cannot see. Because the light we see is merely the electromagnetic radiation of the wavelengths between 380 and 750. And there are other electromagnetic radiations, such as infrared radiation, ultraviolet radiation, radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, gamma waves, that all have the same principles of light, but we cannot see them. So light is all around. And that means that darkness is actually a relative term and has no existence in reality. We just call it darkness because we cannot see the light, but the light is there. So the world is infused with light. We also talked about the possibility of manifesting that divine light that's within us and the effect that has when the presence of that light is experienced around us, the importance of presence as an organizing principle. That divine light, that presence has broken through in the past. We've seen it in the olden times in the presence of saints like Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad. And in modern times, that presence has come through in people like Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King. So the power of presence is something very real. And in bringing that light into the world in this way, we can combat the idea of the world being in darkness and that the world is actually in darkness at the moment. We can actually challenge that. I always love that lovely passage from Isaiah, which is always read at Christmas. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the shadow of death, a light has dawned. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. And he will reign on David's throne over his kingdom, establishing it and holding it with justice and righteousness from that time forward. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. And I think, this is a promise that's given to us all. We see it realized in ancient times in the form of Jesus. But this prophecy is not just for ancient times. It is for us today too. For to us a child is born. To us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This is a promise of right and just government. It is a promise of enlightened leadership, of a world where true wisdom is recognized and celebrated. And yet we discount these prophecies because they're old, and because since they were written, the world has seen so much violence and continues to see violence and oppression. We now live in a time where that violence and oppression continues all over the world, with unjust regimes, with selfishness, with an ignorance that simply craves safety at any price. And yet here we are at a time of Advent, looking towards that hope once again. And as Christmas comes, we allow that hope to well up within us. And yet deep down we suspect it's just an illusion. And that as with every generation, hope will be eclipsed by some ghastly news in the new year, and it will all roll round exactly the same. Last week, I raised the idea of second-hand hope. That is a hope, that the hope that I feel is real. Second-hand hope, a hope that this hope that I feel could be real. No matter how second-hand my hope has become, I can hope for my hope. If we cannot fully get behind a hope that the world will change, then we can take one step back and hope for that hope. And it reminds me of that passage in the Bible where a father asked Jesus to heal his child. Jesus said, "If you believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." We're confronted with the same issue. We have these promises and prophecies, and yet we see the world turning in exactly the same way. We see the continuance of wars and oppression. We see good people quoting good words and encouraging those around them to hold on to hope that things will change. And yet, when we look at the sweep of history and feel the tide rolling in, no matter what we say or do, then our hope starts to go away. And we sort of feel almost Canute-like as we vainly try to stop the passage of these waves of violence and oppression. Now, Cynthia Brogeau of this parish has written a book called Mystical Hope. And there's a great little passage in this book. And she says in this passage, "We ourselves are not the source of that hope. We do not manufacture it, but the source dwells deep within us and flows to us with an unstinting abundance, so that so much of it might be more accurate to say that we actually dwell within the hope." She goes on to say, hope is home at its innermost point in us. Hope's home is its innermost point within us and in all things. Hope, she says, is a quality of aliveness. It doesn't come to an end as the feelings that result from a happy outcome. Rather, it lies at the beginning as a pulse of truth that sends us forth. Hope is a pulse of truth that sends us forth. She goes on, when our innermost being is attuned to this pulse, it'll send us forth in hope, regardless of the physical circumstances of our lives. Hope fills us with the strength to stay present, to abide in the flow of a mercy no matter how the outer storms assail us. It is entered always and only through surrender. That is, through the willingness to let go of everything we presently cling on to. And she finally says, and yet when we enter it, it enters us and fills us with its own life, a quiet strength beyond anything we've ever known. And I love the idea that hope dwells within us. Its home is at our innermost point. And to some extent, this is how we combat the idea that generations that hope seems to fail, by the realization that hope's home is that innermost point within us. It's not because of something, or hope doesn't come because of an attached outcome. Hope doesn't fail because an outcome doesn't occur. That hope is a pulse. It is our radiation of light as we surrender and allow the love of God to come through us. As in all history, the fact that the world has not fallen into hopelessness, is because there are always those who carry that light within them. They gather it in and they send it out to those around them. That's always continued in every generation. And we are in that situation now. Hope is not meaningless because the world has stayed the same with violence and oppression. It has not. It has moved on. We have stayed the same, and we continue to see the progression of consciousness because there are those who, whatever the circumstances, are willing to be that light and willing to be and keep that hope alive. Our role is to have that hope, regardless of the physical circumstances of life. We have to realize that the source of that hope is within us, and we nurture it and express it out to those who are around us. The very presence of that hope gathers around us others who feel that hope but cannot quite put their finger on it, on what it is. This hope is not a wish for something different. It is the incarnation of the Spirit. Just as Jesus was the incarnation, which is really the Spirit made flesh, so we become, with that hope, the Spirit made flesh. We emanate a light that is so irrational that it bypasses the minds of others and it awakens the hope in them too. But the trouble is we think we're special. We think that things should always be getting better, that our generation should be the generation where it all comes good. How dare it be that we are the same as every other generation and we have to suffer in the same ways that they did? But Jesus said, it is not for you to know the times or the dates that the Father has set for by his own authority. We don't know where we are in history or how things will turn out. It's not up to us to decide that all is lost or that we should give up. We have a role in life, and that is to be the light in the world, no matter how dark others may perceive it to be. And this is what it means to have hope, to know that the source of light is within us and to express it in our world in such a way that it is unmistakably still alive. And as we do that, our light is reflected in others. They see that light within you and they feel it in them. It has the same effect as a mirror. What we mirror to others is mirrored back to us. I mean, it has to be that because, that is the way the world works. We all mirror to each other. We're all part of the same consciousness. That's the information that we have, that we know spiritually, that we are all part of the same consciousness. So as we bring hope into that consciousness, so it is raised around us. And to what end? There is no end. Living is the end in itself. To be on the journey is to arrive. We've heard that, we know that. The process of traveling or experiencing a journey is just as important, if not more so, than reaching the final destination. It is the journey, that we arrive in the journey. That wonderful quote from T.S. Eliot's Little Gidding. We shall not cease from exploration. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown, remembered gate when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. At the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree, not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard in the stillness between two waves of the sea. To arrive at the point of hope and to express hope is the end in itself. It is the child that is born within us. For unto us a child is born. To us a son is given. This is the son, this is the child. And the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. That hope within us is that everlasting Father, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. To arrive at that point is the end that we're promised. whatever the world is doing with itself. I quoted Yamada, the Zen master, last week, and he said, "Today, if we're to live in peace with a minimum of suffering, we must establish a spiritual foundation in both our social and domestic lives that is not controlled by the outside world. Normally, our daily activities are continually under the influence of our external environment, controlled and pulled around by it. Because of this, our minds are never at rest. We could say that suffering is the emotion that arises when we come under control of external world against our will. And to have that hope within us, to nurture that light, to express it, is the spiritual foundation that is the end in itself, not controlled by the external world. We have to live like that. Remembering what James Finley said, I quoted this again a few weeks ago, that God protects us from nothing, but sustains us in all things. It is not for us to look out into the world and think, this isn't good enough. Not being done right. We're all going in the wrong direction. I watched The Holdovers recently, and of course, he gives out Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and I had to buy a copy. So I've been reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations over the last few months, and I came across this. When we start sort of accusing people of going the wrong way, and you don't know what you're doing, you're all choosing the wrong things. Marcus Aurelius says, how cruel to forbid people to want what they think is good for them. And yet that's just what you won't let them do when you get angry at their misbehavior. They're drawn towards what they think is good for them. But it's not good for them. Then show them that. Prove it to them instead of losing your temper. We're no different from any other generation. They lived through difficult circumstances. Most of them held that hope within them and expressed it. And we have to thank them that we're still able to access that hope. And we have to express it within our own generation so future generations could look back and say, thank you to us also. I'm on the last page, so you can have hope. This is ending. So as Jesus said in John 14, do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe it also in me. Peace I leave with you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. And I do not give you as the world gives you. So do not let your hearts be troubled. And do not be afraid. When we go there, to that peace, to that place within us, when we realize that time and that hope within us, we arrive and come into the present moment. When we arrive at that point of peace, we come into the present moment. And that now is the time of hope. That now, the present moment, is the time of hope. And I want to remember, and given what's happening in Syria, this is a good thing to end, that wonderful quote from Gandhi. Remember that throughout all history there have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they will seem invincible. But in the end, they always fall. Always. Thank you. So in our service, we always have an opportunity to come back at whoever's spoken, rather than just have them rabbit away and have no responsibility for any response. So we're just going to do that. Normally Heather comes there. Heather's on her way to Morocco at the moment to be with her father, spend a week in Morocco with her father, so she's going to be away for the next few weeks. But if anyone would like to say anything, there's no need to say anything. If we have a nice silence, that's fine as well. But would anyone like to respond, share anything, or make any comment at all? Yes, thank you. Yes, Camille.
Thank you. Marianne Williamson was amazing. what a speaker she is. And thank you for having her here for us. I'd like to say this morning about your eulogy that hope obliterates fear. And in our subconscious mind, if we're fearful and we're pulling that, whatever we're afraid of, we're pulling it straight toward us, just Velcroing it right to us. So keeping that hope and that light alive is so special. Thank you.
Thank you. And you just remind me of that Bible quote, perfect love casts out all fear, which is lovely. And that word perfect, it's an interesting word, perfect. You know, when you look up the etymology in the dictionary of the word that's used for perfect, it doesn't mean absolutely right, it means complete. That's the word that's perfect actually means. To be perfect is to be complete. So there's no competition in your own completion, which I think is quite interesting. Okay, anybody else want to say anything? Yes, Brennan.
Thank you, Nicholas. I just want to thank you that I can now use Marcus Aurelius to limit my son's screen time, so I'm sure that will prove effective. But this is the same question in a different dress that I keep asking, right?
Yeah.
And I think I love the metaphor of the darkness because I think it is so true. And if you, I guess in my mind, and you're formulating that we want to control, and so maybe the metaphor is if we don't have light, we don't think we can control because we don't know what's going on. But outside the perimeter of what we can see, there's creative, whatever you want to call it, higher power at work. And then I think where I get stuck, and I think like a lot of us get stuck, is that unconditional surrender, which is it's not giving up, it's not resignation, but this idea that there is something manifesting ultimately. And it might not make sense, but we just have to be patient with what's happening right now. But I always kind of balk at that term hope in the sense of, from the Buddhist perspective, having an attachment to an outcome, right? I have hope because I want this specific thing to happen, and to your point over there, I think that's a lot of where the fear comes in. Because then if you have hope for a certain expectation, then there's going to be a shadow side of that, which is the fear that that thing is not going to come true. So if there is a question in there, it's probably more along the lines of just creating that space in the darkness to have that sort of, you might call it secondhand hope, but probably maybe it's foundational hope that's not attached to anything, but just has faith and trust that things ultimately work out.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, in a sense, that's why we do a spiritual practice. When we do a spiritual practice, whatever it is, if I take meditation, which is my practice, in meditation, what I'm doing is I'm cultivating that still point within me. I'm cultivating that still point within me, that point where they say, the Zen masters say, where body and mind are falling away. That point where body and mind are falling away. And when body and mind fall away, then we only see our connection to ultimate reality in the present moment. And that doesn't require an outcome. It is just in itself. It is an expression of love. And the trouble is, we think we're special. We think, in a sense, we matter. We do matter. I always think what we do matters. It's really important. What we do in any moment matters because nothing is ever forgotten. It's always there. Every little bit of kindness and goodness, it stays there. It resonates in consciousness, and it's never lost. However, individually, as James Finley said, God doesn't protect us from anything. And if it is our role to have the sword thrust through us, then that is our role to have that come to us. And it is nothing special. God is not going to protect us from that. But God will sustain us as the sword is plunging through us. And as we are giving our light to the world and as that comes about. And so we have to surrender in every moment to that death. And that death can be everything from losing face to all the little deaths that we have. It's letting go of all that to the ultimate death. Thank you. Yes, Dee and then Bruce.
I don't remember where I heard this quotation, but it said, "The light is indifferent to us."
The light is indifferent to us.
Indifferent to us. And my first reaction was, what? It doesn't have my name on it?
Yeah.
You know, but then when I hear what you're saying, that's just what you said, right? And that's the source of our hope. It's always there. I may be in the dark, and it doesn't care if I'm in the dark. It's just what is.
Yes.
And if I learn to tune into that, if I have solid practice that separates me from the travails of the world, I will be more in touch with that. But that's where the power is, and that's why God is not, what you're saying is God doesn't protect us from that, but the light does sustain us.
Yeah. Thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, besides hope and fear, there's also sort of faith. And I think faith in the creative interdependence. I think in past times, we lived in small communities, if your barn burned down, all your neighbors showed up the next day to rebuild the barn. So to say, gee, bad stuff may happen, I'm hopeful, we're going to do our best, etc. But if bad stuff happens, there's the faith that the collective community is going to be able to figure it out. And the obstacle is the new way, as Marcus Aurelius would say.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Myrna Ray.
I really enjoyed Marianne also. One of the things I got from what she said is asking people, what outrageous thing are you going to do, and how can I support you? And I'm getting ready to put another candle on my birthday cake, and I always say, the more candles you put on your birthday cake, the brighter your light shines.
Yes, thank you, Myrna Ray. That's great. Great. Yeah, thank you for that. That's lovely.